Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In June of last year, the Pentagon announced that they identified a $6.2 billion accounting error in the value of the equipment that they had previously sent to Ukraine. And then just a couple weeks ago, the Pentagon said in a release that, quote, the Army had found additional funds, $300 million, after renegotiating contract costs to replace equipment that's already been sent to Ukraine. This release also quoted an unnamed official. It's long, but I think it's worth actually reading and quoting and to highlight the absurdity of it. Quote, we had savings come in that will allow us to offset the cost of a new drawdown package, said a senior defense official today. Quote, the savings that have come in here are going to help square the circle of what the secretary said of needing to have new funding come in to be comfortable doing any more drawdown. We did have funds come in that can cover the cost of one more package, but this is a bit of an ad hoc or one-time shot. We don't know if or when future savings will come in, and we certainly can't count on this being a way of doing business. Well, end quote. I would agree that this is no way to do business. And I know this commission doesn't have anything to do with funding Ukraine or any contingency for that matter. But I do want to just bring this up that you talk about people losing faith in institutions. It's really hard, I think, for people when we talk about these additional drawdown packages and then they suddenly found $6.2 billion. I know in our budget, maybe people don't think that's a lot of money. Where I come from, that's a lot of money. $6.2 billion is a lot of money. So I guess the question for each one of you, if you want to chime in here, is what can be done to enhance the transparency and accountability here with the DoD's budgeting and acquisition to both Congress and to the public, addressing these? It just feels like we're just continually pulling money out of thin air. Anyway.
I believe that one of the recommendations that squarely addresses this is the need for modern business systems. I went into DoD after 33 years in industry, and the systems, the business systems used by the Pentagon are 10, 20, 30 years old, and they do not talk to one another, so to speak. So there is a lot of fat fingering that has to happen to move, one set of numbers to another. And I believe there's always going to be human error. One of our recommendations here is to demand that we have modern business systems based on commercial off-the-shelf technology versus having these bespoke systems that are developed by different groups within DoD, outsourcing other groups to do them. There is a lot of reconciliation that has to be done with the systems we have now. And in fact, our staff has an enormous amount of experience on that. I don't know, Laura, if you want to comment on that, having worked with the financial systems.
So the financial systems are a bit antiquated, and there's not consistent capability across the department. I've worked across multiple services, Air Force, Navy, and SOCOM, and every time you change commands, it's something different. There's also not consistent training. So like the transparency you need should be in the justification material, the J-books, the RDocs. There's not consistent training on what we describe and tell Congress what we're procuring with
But do you
those
think
dollars.
you think that would address this particular issue? Like somehow we found $6.2 billion.
That was actually a misinterpretation of confusing regulation in the financial management regulation. That actual document from the department is over 7,000 pages, hasn't really been updated. And whenever they make small changes, they don't pull it through the entire document. And so they interpreted one section of it one way, and then when they went back and read it again, they realized they had it wrong. And so that's one of our big recommendations, is for them to clean up their house on their guidance documents, sir.
I do want to get to one other question. I think everybody here can think of recent examples of major acquisition programs that either gone completely off the rails, like the Army's future combat systems that wasted roughly $18 billion with virtually nothing to show for it, to continuing over time and over budget, like the F-35 that's 10 years late and 80% over budget. And while there's a bunch of reasons why I think these programs fail or struggle, I wonder if the PPBE reform could be a way to address some of those fundamental issues. And I also think this is particularly relevant in this kind of lightning fast technological innovation phase that we've got to be better at, I think. And I've heard from some industry leaders that the system procurement specifications that are often, they're really prescriptive. They're really prescriptive. And for example, rather than simply stating what warfare problem is DoD trying to solve and solicit really kind of market solutions, it's quite the opposite. It's on the front end being strictly, very, very prescriptive. And I just think this is going to be really important. It's always been important, but now with the competition with China and others, it's really important. What are some recommendations you guys might have to address that? Because it feels like this is a behemoth that we talk about it. We know it's a problem, but then you get into a 7,000-page document that people interpret differently. So what can actually be done to cut through here?
So the requirements process is a big part of it, but then when those requirements are translated to budget documents, we have to be very careful. We have an example in the report about buying pens. You specify one color pen. If you find pens that are a different color, you can't buy them. So what I would say is, we need to be very careful how we define requirements and then how we contract future combat systems. I was on the industry side for that. There was a major debacle in terms of the acquisition community not working closely with the operators, the people, the warfighters who were actually going to use what was being procured. So what ended up being procured was not what was needed. With future combat systems, we gave all the responsibility and authority to a prime contractor and have pulled it back over time. So there are major problems with the way these acquisitions were originally drafted. And that's more of an acquisition problem. But what we're talking about is making sure with these justification books that we do not have overly prescriptive language and that we don't have too many finite budget line items that cause program managers to wait weeks and months to get money that actually is authorized and appropriated for them to use because of these administrative glitches.
Thank you. We'll continue the conversation another time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms.